Hey, it's Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Tuesday. It is April 18th, and this will be our chart lesson for the day. And really, we had a downward bias. This is a trading range type day, but we had a downward bias here for most of the day. Um, well, I should say till maybe around 11 o'clock, and then we kind of had a more neutral to upward bias. But it's a range day in the end, and so you really could trade this both ways. You have to be careful trading it both ways, though. You want to look for shorts at the highs and longs at the lows. And so you got to be real careful and make sure you understand where the highs and lows are, because a lot of times when you get in the middle, that's when you have the most problems. But it turns out most of your highs were right along this 23.41 level. We did push above that briefly right after the regular session opening, but we never could really get back above that 23.41. And this just kind of, this should be pulled on across. You can see that there. And that turned out to really be your resistance area for the day. And most of your support came right along this 23.3750 and 23.35, right in that area. We pushed lower temporarily, but in the end, most of your support came along that area right in there. So once you understand that, you got to realize that's where most of your trades are going to set up. So anyway, let's back out, talk about the trades. Um, this looks a little messy. Really, you needed to go by your shorter term trend lines and your support and resistance areas. I have this bigger channel on there. I believe it's valid. If you drew it off these top two and drug it down, you would have known exactly where this was bouncing. And really, I meant to mark that with a green one. And this could almost be blue, just like this one here. I'll talk about it when we get there. It could almost be green. They're a little risky. You almost always are better off to wait on a higher low. But, by the time you get a higher low in both of these cases, it's really, or a higher low here, it's too late. And then when you get a lower high here, it's way down here. So, but I like these setups when you are pretty confident you're reading the price action properly. When you get this far away from the EMA, it's just a matter of time before it's coming back again. And this is a 21 bar EMA for anybody that's new, that's not familiar with what we're doing here. Notice how prices kind of congregate around that 21 bar EMA. And that's because that's the average of all this pricing. And that tends to be a very good place to look for reversals and things like that. If you're trending, a pullback to that area is a good place to look for a reversal. And you can see that on the downside and back on the upside. But today's more of a range day. So notice how we're swinging below it, above it, below it, above it, below it, above it. That's a sure sign you're in a range day. When you're consistently above it, it's probably an uptrend or a rally. And if you're consistently below it, you got a sell off or a downtrend. So just keep that in mind. But let's talk about the trades. When I came in, and this is the hard right side of your chart, we were trending down. You got to figure, that's not a lot of movement during the overnight, so it could be a range day. But we had a break here. We're probably going to get a retest of the low. So there's actually, you could actually treat this like a failed second entry long, but you don't have a break of this short-term trend line working up through here yet. You can see that, and that's your first close outside of it really is right here. And you don't really have a break and a retest yet, but you don't always get that on your shorter term stuff. So sometimes it's a calculated risk. But being that close to the EMA, although that does really confirm that trend line, you could treat it as a failed second entry long, because this is a double top here. So first entry, second entry. It's not a failure though, so I'm probably going to skip that one and see if we don't shoot down and come back and then give you a short. And it does that here, but again, it's not a perfect setup. It's not a perfect signal bar. This is real close to being red. We don't quite have a new high yet. You're better off probably to wait on the reversal pattern, and that comes here again right off the trend line. You got a bearish bar. Now I like taking a short for a retest of this low. Again, you might enter here, and you might even consider entering here, but not being any further away from the EMA than that, it could touch the EMA and bounce, and it did temporarily, but that trend line continued to hold there. So um, I like being a little aggressive. It's not a perfect signal bar, although it is really bearish. It still closed a couple of ticks off the low. You might let it break lower and then drop your limit order in a tick or two into that to get a little better entry, and you would have. But the ideal trade is to see if you get that reversal pattern. And there it is. Again, right off the trend line, big bearish bar. Just go short right there. And that's a nice trade. And then we bounce. You didn't get a good enough. You got a little higher low here. You're not very far away from the EMA. You don't have a very good signal bar. Wait till you get a reversal pattern. Uh, you you get a semi reversal. Notice how we made a new high higher than that one. We pulled back. You trap people, but I think you need to wait on that one more push lower, and you don't get that till here, and you're not back to the EMA on this one. It would have worked, but I think it's too risky. There's a lot of overlap right there. They're not really dojis, but still you're kind of going sideways. There's too big a chance, and there's also a high right there. You're going long right into basically a double top. So I just don't like that one. But it does fit the reversal pattern. If you're trying to be a little aggressive, you might consider it. I think you're better off to wait, and then you come back and you get a bounce, a nice bullish bar that bounces right off the EMA. Um, you do get a close outside this trend line. Uh, but you don't have a lot of room to the high. But this is also a breakout. Notice you pushed above that double top. That's important. That's a breakout pullback long, and that's a pretty bullish bar. So again, it's not a great setup, but there's reasons to look for this to come back up and test this high, and it's coming right off the EMA. And it would have been a nice trade, but it's a little bit aggressive. And then now you've got to close outside a new high, and look what it does. Notice even from yesterday, this was support and resistance. Notice how we were using that same level yesterday. We're using it today. That's telling you that's an important point. When you're that far away from the EMA and you get a reversal bar like that, I like taking that one. It's real close to being green because you're better off to wait on the lower high, and that comes here, but then you're right into the EMA. So again, just like over here, you're better off to wait on that reversal pattern, which kind of comes here. Um, and it confirms those first two swings there. It's not a perfect signal bar, and it's not technically on this chart. It's not really a failed second entry long, but if you went to a smaller chart, you would see one, and that's one leg down. So you're probably going to get a measured move down if it does go lower. So I like that trade, and you can see we got a couple of ticks more than a measured move, but that would have been my target right there, and then it bounces. So you got this channel working down, so you don't really want to go long here. You're just really waiting on a chance to get short. You get a failed second entry long here and a nice bearish bar, but it's an inside bar to this, and it's right into all that support right there. So you really don't want to take that trade, and if you did, you would have got trapped and it went higher. And you really don't want to go long here either, because again, we're looking for prices to test this low, and you're just kind of going sideways here. So it's too close to these highs. So I think you're better off to wait and see what happens. You do end up testing this breakout level here, and you test it twice, but this is too neutral a bar. You're still above the EMA, but when it comes back and gives you a double tap of this level right here and gives you that bearish bar, and you've got a lot of room down here to this low, I like taking it then. You don't know that it's going to keep going like that, but it does in this case. And once it started going lower, I'm looking for a measured move like so. And I also would have been looking for a measured move right here. And you notice where that puts you right back down in this area. And then I would have measured this whole thing as well. And come over here. You see that's really close to our measured move there. We went a couple of ticks further. but that wouldn't have necessarily been unexpected, because if you drew this trend line up here off that high and that first close and drug it down, you're going to look for it to bounce somewhere right in there between that low and the closes. And generally, I like to use the closes. They give you a more accurate read more times than not. But once you get a little more price action, then you can figure out exactly where it's at. But that was our first two swings, so that's all we had. And since it did bounce exactly where we were kind of expecting, and very close to measured moves, and you're a long way away from the EMA, you might consider coming back there. Again, it's real close to being blue. I think you're better off to wait on the higher low, and you get one here right in, but you're going long right into a double top. So wait on another trap, and you get a trap right there. And even then, you're just kind of stacked up sideways. You got 3 or more bars. You got a doji. I'm not crazy about it, because a lot of times it'll fail. And even though you would have survived this and been able to scalp out, it still failed. Notice it breaks out and it fails. And that's why you got to be leery of those. Again, you get a breakout and it comes back, and you get a double test of this level here. Not a very good signal bar. It's right back into the highs again. But once you try to go low multiple times like that and it fails, eventually you're going higher. So you might, there's reasons to consider entering there, but I think you're better off to wait. And it comes back one more time and you get a nice bullish bar. And by this time you got a little more. This is really important, so pay attention to this part right here. Notice how we're flat right here, but look what's happening up on the top. You're making higher highs every single time. And that's your clue. We're probably going higher. It's getting a little more momentum to the upside each time. And by that third swing, you got a real clear, your price action is very clear that, hey, we're making higher highs every time we come back here, and we're not making lower lows. We're just staying stagnant right here. Once you test the level so many times and you can't go lower, it's usually that double test rule, you're usually going higher. So you really could have entered on either one of any of those, but you didn't have a whole lot of information until this third push up. And so I really like that one. And look at it go. And that was most people understood then what was going on, and off it goes. And you really don't get another chance to enter this one. If it would have pulled back here and bounced off and made a tick lower and bounced off, I probably would have said maybe you'd enter here. But that is right back into the support resistance area. So you're better off really to let it push through and come back and test it, and you really don't get a good test. It just keeps going. So, and at this point, this would be my target. If you're long, I'd be looking for it to at least come to here. Notice we push a little further before we get a big correction here. But at this point, since this didn't really hold and we pushed on through, I'm going to wait for a lower high, and we don't get a lower high until we get down here, and then it's back to the trend line. And if this hadn't been after 3 o'clock, I probably wouldn't have gone long on this one. But when we got this higher low right here, I probably would have gone long. So something to think about there. And if you draw your little short-term trend line here down those bars, you can see we got a close outside, a move to a new low, and then it reversed. This is not a good enough signal bar, even though it does confirm the trend line. But when it went higher and pulls back, and you get that nice bullish bar, I would have gone long, and I like that one. So, yeah, that got us into the 2 o'clock hour. Not a lot of trades again today, but there were a few of them that moved pretty well. And I always tell people, if you can catch these highs or catch these lows on a range day, you can usually ride it all the way back up or all the way back down. And that's why it's important. Notice if you caught either one of these important highs, this was an important high, this was another one. Temporarily, this was an important high. But then notice where the important lows are, way down here, right here. And if you caught either of those, you get a nice ride out of it, and you get a runner out of it. So you don't need a lot of, that's usually the only time on days like this I'll try to hold on to a runner on a big range day, unless it's a really big range where there's a lot of movement. But on these tighter range days, generally I won't try to hold a runner unless we're coming off these highs like this, important highs or important lows. And generally where you got to be really careful, entering too on a range day is in the middle, because you can see it can get kind of wacky in here. But so that's why I liked waiting on this double test here, because you got to be careful. But once you get that double test, you in that bearish bar, you've got what you need to probably can say, hey, we're not going to go higher, we're going to go lower before we go higher. So I hope that's clear as well. But yeah, not a lot of trades, but not a bad trading day. And if we'd had a better signal bar right here, I might have said go short here, because that was just another test of that important level. And you did have a break of this short term here, and a couple of pushes to a new high, and 3 little pushes there. So the only reason I didn't like that one's the signal bar. But if you'd had a really nice bearish signal bar, I'd have liked probably jumping in there just to ride it back to the EMA. So, but yeah, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.